The Green Arrow. Oliver Queen is the Green Arrow, one of DC Comics' greatest stars, and a hero whose personal life is as complicated as his action-packed heroic adventures. He has been many things in his life, but his greatest role is that of the Emerald Archer. Oliver Queen, the Green Arrow, is a bit of an anachronism among his heroic colleagues. He cannot fly or run fast. He does not wield a powerful ring or carry the powers of the gods. He is, simply put, a normal human being with great skill in an archaic form of battle, archery. Yet, despite this, by fighting for the rights and protection of regular people like himself, the Green Arrow has risen to become one of the world's greatest heroes. The son of a billionaire in Star City, young Oliver Queen, heir to his family's manufacturing empire, never had a care in the world, until his parents were tragically killed. No one knows the details of their deaths, and Oliver has refused to discuss them since becoming an orphan in his late teens. Unprepared for the duties and responsibilities of being a corporate mogul, Oliver tried to hide from the company his family had created, leaving Star City on his yacht for a South Sea cruise. The billionaire playboy hoped to leave his problems behind him, but a freak wave later knocked him off his yacht, and he drifted ashore on a desert island. With no food, water, servants, or any of the other comforts to which he'd grown accustomed, Oliver was forced to rely on his wits to survive. He fashioned a crude bow and arrow out of items found on the island, and used them to obtain food such as coconuts. He built a shelter out of trees and harnessed the power of fire for light, heat, and cooking. It was out of necessity that Oliver became proficient in archery, a skill that would define the rest of his life. After many months, he was rescued from the island and taken back to his home in Star City, where he assumed his rightful position as the head of his family's company. He first used his expertise as an archer during a costume party full of his rich and famous friends, when, dressed like Robin Hood, he stopped a robbery by firing off several arrows at the crooks. The guests were impressed by his ability and grateful for his endeavors. It was then that he was given the name Green Arrow. A short while later, during a business trip to Vietnam, Oliver saw at first hand the damage that the weapons made by his company were doing to the Asian nation and elsewhere. Whilst there, he ran into his future friend, a young Air Force pilot named Hal Jordan. Disturbed by what he'd seen in Asia, Oliver sold the weapons division of his corporation and set out to right wrongs in the world. His vision had no boundaries as he travelled around America fighting crime and injustice. Green Arrow's biggest fan, Roy Harper, lived on an Indian reservation in the American Southwest. Raised by the chief of the reservation's tribe, Roy learned archery at a very early age. His adopted father, Brave Bow, encouraged Roy to follow the Green Arrow stories. One day, Oliver visited the reservation, and Roy impressed him with his great skill with a bow and arrow. When Brave Bow died a short time later, Oliver adopted Roy as his ward, and Green Arrow gained a new teenage sidekick named Speedy. Oliver and Roy returned to Star City and continued their battles for good. They gained worldwide attention for their efforts, culminating in the Justice League of America inviting Green Arrow to join the group as its first non-founding member. Times suddenly got really hard for Oliver Queen when his business partner, John de Leon, cheated him out of his inherited fortune. Having lost everything, Oliver felt a great deal of empathy for the poor and downtrodden of America. With a new perspective on the world, as seen from the gutters rather than the penthouse, Green Arrow had a new attitude and a new look. He grew a small beard and wore a costume that more closely resembled Robin Hood's traditional garb. Indeed, he wanted to steal from the rich and give to the poor, as the fictional outlaw of Sherwood Forest had done centuries before. To accomplish this, he joined forces with a man he had met in Vietnam, Hal Jordan, now revealed to be fellow Justice Leaguer Green Lantern. The two old friends travelled across America, battling racism, poverty, government corruption, and a host of other social issues. Along the way, Dinah Lance, also known as the Black Canary, occasionally joined Oliver and Hal. Oliver had fallen in love with Dinah during their time together in the Justice League, and his feelings for her only grew the more time they spent together. However, tragedy also struck Green Arrow during this period, when he discovered his own ward and sidekick, Speedy, was addicted to heroin. Not knowing how to handle Roy's drug use, Oliver left him in Dinah's hands. Although the decision was not popular with Roy and hurt his relationship with Oliver, it helped bring Speedy and Black Canary close together. For several years, Oliver functioned as a social crusader. With his arsenal of trick arrows and an extremist social consciousness, he developed a reputation for protecting the victims of the world. Yet he felt that there was something else he needed to do. Following Dinah to Seattle, when she moved there to open a flower shop, Oliver took on a new approach to fighting for justice, and once again changed his costume to reflect the shift in his attitude. Wearing a hood and forsaking his trick arrows, Oliver launched a campaign against violent crimes in Seattle. His latest quest took on a more personal tone than it ever had before, when Dinah was kidnapped, tortured, and nearly killed by a serial murderer. Oliver rescued the love of his life, saving her from the sadist's clutches. The experience drew the couple together for a time, but they soon broke up, citing the stresses of the near-death experience they had just shared as the main reason. In Seattle, Oliver also met and fell in love with Shadow, a mysterious assassin who also sought social justice against drug dealers. The pair had a son together, but Oliver was unaware of the child's existence. With the on-and-off relationship with Dinah becoming increasingly hard on the both of them, Oliver made the decision to leave Seattle and return to Star City. It turned out that Shadow's son, Robert, was not the only child Oliver Queen had fathered. There was also a boy named Connor Hogg, who had been raised by monks. Oliver visited the monastery and met Connor, who revealed his parentage to Oliver. Despite having no contact with Connor prior to that point, Oliver had secretly known about the boy's existence. Once they were united, Connor became Oliver's protege, hoping for the chance to follow in his father's footsteps. That chance came much sooner than anyone expected. While preventing a terrorist from exploding a nuclear device in Metropolis, Oliver was killed. The world mourned the death of Green Arrow, while his son kept his memory alive by taking the name for himself and replacing his father in the Justice League. Oliver was dead for several years, but eventually had his body and soul restored by his friend Hal Jordan, who had become an incredibly powerful supernatural entity known as the Spectre. Unsurprisingly, such an experience caused Oliver to re-evaluate his life once again. Celebrating his new lease of life, Oliver fixed his estranged relationship with Roy Harper, and they again fought side by side, even taking a cross-country road trip together. The recently resurrected Oliver took this adventure not as a social crusader, but for the opportunity it offered him to reconnect with his roots, and collect many of his prized possessions that had been scattered across America. With Connor still working as the Green Arrow, Oliver's family acquired another junior member in the form of Maya Dearden, a teenager infected with HIV, who became the new Speedy. Dinah occasionally joined the Green Arrow team as well. She still had feelings for Oliver, although they were not as strong as they once had been. They were not as strong as his feelings for her either. Oliver unsuccessfully proposed marriage several times during this period. Oliver and his kids, Roy, Connor, and Maya, were active heroes and reserve members of the Justice League. They proved to be valuable team members when the world was attacked by rogue creatures called Omacs, which led to the universe-changing events chronicled in the Infinite Crisis storyline. In the aftermath of the cosmic crisis, Oliver, Connor, and Maya travelled to an island where they received combat training from a mysterious teacher named Natas, who had also trained one of Green Arrow's arch-enemies, Deathstroke the Terminator. Abandoned by Natas, the trio of archers had to fight their way off the island and return to Star City, where Oliver undertook his most ambitious fight against crime yet. He ran for mayor of his hometown, and won. As mayor of Star City, Oliver sought to eliminate crime, including vigilante activity. He was forced to publicly condemn Green Arrow's activities, whilst secretly continuing them for the good of his beloved city. Oliver's time as mayor didn't last long, however. Not only was he exposed as being the Green Arrow, but it was discovered that he was bankrolling a superhero group called the Outsiders, which included Roy. Now out of office, Oliver returned to full-time hero work with his family by his side. Having held such high public office, Ollie appeared to have finally embraced responsibility and maturity. It had been a long process that had required death and parenthood to accomplish, but although he had been passed over for membership in the latest incarnation of the Justice League in favor of Roy, who had taken the name Red Arrow, he was still ready to serve his friends. Putting his new maturity to the test, Oliver once again asked Black Canary to marry him, and once again she said no. Dinah had taken in a ward of her own, a girl named Sin, whom she considered to be a daughter. Sin's life was threatened, and Oliver made it appear that she'd been killed. Dinah was furious with him, but soon discovered Sin was alive and in hiding. Rebounding from the emotional ordeal, Dinah finally accepted Oliver's proposal of marriage. Though many people could hardly believe that it was finally happening, the Justice League celebrated the couple's union in style. Wedding plans were made and prenuptial parties were held, which some of the DC Universe's most notorious villains unsuccessfully tried to disrupt. Oliver and Dinah made it to the altar and were married. Superheroes everywhere rejoiced. But matters took a very dark turn on the wedding night, when Oliver attacked Dinah, forcing her to retaliate, killing her husband of only a few hours. DNA tests showed that the dead man was not actually Oliver Queen. Green Arrow had been kidnapped after the wedding and taken prisoner by a group of rogue Amazons. The Amazons had hoped that the kidnapping would lure Black Canary into joining their ranks. It didn't, and Oliver was eventually rescued by Connor and Dinah. Oliver and Black Canary hoped to begin their life as man and wife, but clouds were already beginning to gather over their future together. Oliver Queen is a man of great passions, for justice, for his family, and for humanity. He may not have superpowers, but he has the heart of a hero and is possibly the world's greatest archer. No matter what life throws at this resurrected hero, he will tackle it. Like his arrows, he will always fly straight and true. He is the Emerald Archer, the Green Arrow.